Welcome to Making It Artisan Stories with Bert Piedmont, an author and creator of various cards and items of semi-occult nature.
About 10, 15 years ago, I started creating of objects and working at some New Age fairs, the Astrological Society of Connecticut New Age Fair. My friend Carol and I wrote this book called Ayersford, and we had a lot of fun doing it, and that kind of got me into, well, I want to do my own thing. I don't want to work on Carol's vision. Mm-hmm. I want to work on Bert's vision. Mm-hmm. And I decided to, get my master's degree, which I did, and that's where the stories in the MAW came from, all the different classes that I took that were in kind of, pushing your literary boundaries and pushing your imagination and doing things in a different way. And I just started to see that there was this theme to where my imagination went, just these certain little bits that it came back to. And when I was done, I called up my friend and I said, I think we could make a little book out of this. And we did, and that's it. And people who read it seem to really like it.
I read it last night and this morning, and I was enthralled. I was so impressed with this book. I immediately wanted to read more of what you had written. It was subtly humorous, but it was also deep, and it was thought-provoking, and it was transportive. It was the world that you created in that book is fascinating, and it really draws you in and really makes you want to read more of what. It comes together as something that you could see all these other possibilities opening up of where the story could go. And so you took the story other places here?
This is like Stephen King and his Dark Tower. This is like my Dark Tower. I mean, after I finished this, and I said, well, that's it. Everything's going to be related to this. I went back and I looked at Ayersford. Ayersford had a lizard in it, and he was the first time traveling lizard. How else could he have gone everywhere in the book and known what everybody was thinking if he wasn't a time-traveling lizard? Wherever that came from, it's been happening for a really long time. In the Mickey Crow series, it's a lot more subtle, but it's still the same world, formless. The Shigatli is the Chomping Chinampa from here. I never say Chomping Chinampa, but if you've read the Maw and you read Formless, you're going to recognize it and be like, here's this amorphous, shape-shifting thing that eats people, and it appears again in my book that's about to come out in February, which is called Fat Monster. In this case, it's slightly different in that it's now a fungus. Mm-hmm. It's part mushroom, but it's still
the thread that goes through the different books.
Yeah.
And connects them.
And that's cosmic horror, and also about how badly fat women are treated by society. So the Fat Monster has a kind of dual meaning as being the monster itself, and also how people look at the main character, who's an overweight woman.
It's really fascinating, the creatures that you've summoned up with your imagination. Can you tell us about some of these creatures and where you might have got inspiration for them?
The Shoggoth I didn't invent. The Shoggoth came from H.P. Lovecraft, but I put my own take on it, which is why I've now shifted it into putting an Aztec spin on it and calling it a Shigatli. I've taken it and made it into my own. I've made it smaller. I've made it more intelligent. I've made it more flexible where it can become anything, whereas the Shoggoth was kind of protoplasmic, but it wasn't something that could truly shapeshift into anything, whereas my Shigatli can. So I do kind of riff on things that exist. Formless, obviously, is a mermaid, but I took the idea of a mermaid and I said, what if instead of being half a fish, what if it was half a shark? What would that mermaid be if it had like those shark instincts? So I kind of took that idea and kind of turned it on its head. I think people tend to think like, oh, mermaids are like sweet and good, and these mermaids, they have big nasty shark teeth and the black eyes, and from here down they're shark, and I gave them kind of their own biology where they can mate with humans or mate with sharks, and I made it really complex. It even goes a little bit with the chart I have in the maw with how the mermaids there work. So again, like I took something that exists, I put my own spin on it, made it my own thing.
And how did you come to like kind of set it in Mesoamerica?
That's been a fascination of mine since college. I read this book called just Aztec by Gary Jennings, which is, I read it at least once a year, and it's an amazing book. It really made me completely fall in love with their culture. Every single year I used to actually publish a little calendar. I used to correlate our calendar system with theirs.
Mm-hmm. In the book, you kind of show what the world might have been like if the Americas hadn't been invaded and basically diseased to death when they came in contact with the Europeans. It's just fascinating how these different circumstances might have evolved had these ancient civilizations been allowed to continue into modern technology. And is that something that you go into in the other books?
There's a story of mine that's going to be out in the spring in a literary magazine called 34 Orchard. Another story along those lines. I call them dragons, but it's one of their Quetzalcoatl people, intelligent people that has come up to live in Boston and is the subject of a lot of like racial inequality and being attacked. And there's a lot of metaphors, which is how a story about a Quetzalcoatl got into a literary magazine because of that. But it's a story set in that world, and she's actually a librarian down there, and she comes up looking for a rare manuscript, but she's got to face the fact that like the people where she comes from accept her for being a dinosaur, but when she comes up here, they think that she's a terrible monster. That was the sort of thing I want to look at, because if a society just evolves and it's got different creatures that evolve alongside of it, what happens when you come forward and it's the time of the revolution and you've got a dinosaur who's a librarian with glasses on who just wants to read a book? How is that person? It's a person. How's that going to get treated? And that's going to be out in the spring. I think it's just 34orchard.com, but it's free to read. And it's a really good, dark literary journal.
I'll be reading it. One thing that I noticed was they're very, timeless kinds of themes. Your work is esoteric in a way, but at the same time, these themes are, truly at the heart of humanity. There's things that, we have to search our collective souls to really, root out what's, just a primal urge kind of thing and what's something that we consciously evolve into. They're great for opening up the box of the mind, kind of bring people into another way of thinking about things. And I can see that at first, with a short summary of what these books are, that people may not understand the real depth of the stories that you are telling. So I'm really, really glad to know that there's more of these books coming out so that I will have more to read in the future. And thank you so much for joining us here, Making It Artisan Stories, and I hope to see you next time.
You can find me GuevaraBurtPiedmont.com. You can also buy them from me in person.
I really just hope that this program does reach out to some people who are looking for some very interesting reading material.
That would be nice.
And they could purchase your books. It would be very entertaining.